In this Lord of the Flies video, I'll discuss Freud's psychoanalysis of Lord of the Flies and its characters. I'll discuss the id, the ego, and the superego. Now, this probably sounds like gibberish to you right now, and that's okay, but by the end of the video, you will have a better understanding of these terms. But why are we doing this? Well, we're going to use this information to make broader connections as part of our level 3 analysis, and the information is important to central characters and themes in the story. But first, a bit of context. Who is Sigmund Freud? You might have heard of his name before. He's one of the most important thinkers of the modern world, and he was born in 1856. He was born in a country that was then known as Moravia, now the Czech Republic, and it was part of the Austrian Empire. And as I said, he is one of the most important thinkers of the modern world because he's the founder of psychoanalysis. He's the godfather of psychology. We know more about the human mind today because of him. Now, psychoanalysis, what is that? It's a system of psychological theories and therapies which aims to treat mental disorders. And it does this by investigating repressed fears and conflicts that are in the mind. And it uses non-invasive techniques, and that is the important part. It doesn't cut the mind open, don't cut the brain open as what would have been done previously. But it uses means such as talking and listening, analysing dreams, and free association. You know, when I say X, what do you immediately think of? This is psychoanalysis, and it was pioneered and founded by Sigmund Freud. Now, in Freudian psychology, there are 3 levels to the mind. At the top, the bit of the iceberg we can see, the bit that's always there, the active conscious part of the mind. This is what we actively think about right now, what we're actively thinking about. So at the moment, you're probably thinking about the sound of my voice, the words you read on screen, the hunger in your stomach. Whatever you're actively thinking about is the conscious. Below this, not too far below the surface, able to get to, is the pre-conscious. These are where memories live, experiences, your hopes and desires, things you can access when you want, but you don't think about all the time. For instance, if I asked you to tell me the capital of America, you could do that, but you're not actively thinking about Washington, D.C. all of the time. If I asked you to tell me about a holiday you went on 2 years ago, you could, but you don't think about that holiday all the time. This is the pre-conscious. At the bottom of the iceberg, where we don't reach, where we don't see, is the unconscious. These are the repressed memories and emotions. Now, we don't access these. Our brain, it's not accessible to our conscious mind. We can't just bring these things up and think about them. They are unconscious. They're repressed. But they do affect our behaviors and our perceptions of the world. Now, in Freudian theory of psychoanalysis, there are 3 components to the human personality. The human personality, according to Freud, is complex, and it has these 3 components which work together to create personality and create our human behaviors. They're known as the id, the ego, and the superego. Now, I'll begin with the id. The id, I want you to imagine it like that little demon that sits on your shoulder. It is 100% unconscious. The id is always there with its desires and its wishes, but we don't know they're there. We don't actively think about it. Our conscious mind can't think about them. It looks for immediate gratification. Essentially, its only objective is to gain pleasure and avoid pain, the pleasure principle. And it's the only personality present above. And this is important. I want you to imagine a baby. Now, a baby feels hunger. Okay, and because it feels hunger, it cries. The baby doesn't think, oh, I probably shouldn't cry right now because mum's asleep. It cries when it's hungry, it cries when it wants pleasure, it cries when it wants to avoid pain. This is all the id. However, we do learn to repress this. For instance, as an adult, if I'm hungry, I don't just steal a baby's food. I don't just go and punch them because they make me angry, right? That the id might tell me to. The id might say, you're hungry, you want instant pleasure, steal that candy bar from a kid. But I do repress that, and that's why the id is 100% unconscious. Now, on the other side of our shoulders, we have the angel. This is the superego. Now, the superego is mostly unconscious, but all 3 levels of our brain has access to the superego, or it works on all 3 levels of our brain, sorry. It is essentially our conscience, our thing that tells us what's right and what's wrong. Now, the superego works on the moral principle. Never do anything bad, never think anything bad, never feel anything bad. This is the goal and the objective of the superego, to be perfect and ideal. It tries to suppress the id. It tries to make the id go away. These pleasure principles without fear of consequence, it pushes them down. And when we give in, the superego makes us feel guilty. Have you ever had that desire to just eat loads and loads of cake, and then you do it and you feel bad that you did it? Or have you ever stolen candy from a baby and then felt bad? That's the superego telling you to feel guilty. But it was probably the id telling you to steal the candy in the first place. And it develops around age of 5 as morality develops, as we learn right from wrong, because our parents punish or reward us, society punishes or reward us. And this is where the superego develops. Now, in the middle, balancing these two things, this superego angel and the id demon, is the ego. The ego is mostly conscious, it's aware, it's actively thinking, and it's the middleman between these two things, between the id and the superego. It balances the demands of the id and the superego, but it tries to satisfy them both. Again, I'm hungry, but I know it's not an appropriate time to eat. So what I do is, instead of not eating the chocolate cake all at once, I go home and I eat a little bit of a slice. I try to satisfy both the id and the superego. It works on the reality principle. It's aware of all of these things. It's aware of, the rewards and the consequences, what's good and what's right, what's wrong. And it works on this level, on this reality principle. Now, what's next? Why is this important? Well, in Lord of the Flies, we have 3 characters, Piggy, Ralph, and Jack. And I have a question for you. Based on Freudian psychoanalytical theory of the mind and personality, which part of the personality could each of the boys in the Lord of the Flies represent? Which part could Piggy represent? Which part could Ralph represent? And which part could Jack represent? The id, the ego, the superego. Think about that. What I want you to do is I want you to connect each boy with each part of the personality and then find evidence to support your answer. Good luck.